Peace, y'all, and welcome to Gather and Heal, the podcast. My name is Vanessa Sujey, and I am your holistic host. Basically, we're going to have lots of combos. Sometimes it'll be just me, and sometimes we'll have some guests. No matter what the topic is, though, I'm going to make sure that it connects right back to your emotional wellness and healing journey.
Hello, everyone. It is Vanessa Sujey here, CEO and founder of Gather and Heal, the podcast. And I am super excited to have yet another guest joining. We've got Faith here who's going to talk to us a little bit today about sleep and in relation to stress and anxiety. And when I saw this topic come through, Faith, when you put that in there in the RSVP to come on the podcast, I was like, oh, yes. Because actually, oddly enough, no one else has talked about sleep. And it's really interesting because I know in my individual practice that the discussion of sleep comes up all the time. It's one of my first questions for people. And yeah, I feel like there's so many ways that sleep and anxiety and stress can go. But before we jump into all that juicy stuff, tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are your people? What do you do for a living? What do you enjoy doing for fun? Let's start there.
Sure. So, again, I'm Dr. Perez McGowan. I'm a licensed psychologist from Texas. I'm currently in North Carolina. I've been here for about 18 months. So I'm still exploring the East Coast, which has been awesome.
Yes.
And things that I do for fun. So I have 2 children. And a partner, and we enjoy hiking, swimming, and just kind of being outside. It was pretty hot in Texas, so we, which people think it's pretty hot here, but it's been nice. No, yeah, you can't compare. We've just been spending a lot of time outside, and just doing those kind of things, and then. In terms of sleep and anxiety, I previously worked at a large VA clinic in South Texas. And that's where I really became interested in sleep. It wasn't something I actually studied in graduate school. I did do a lot of work with anxiety, but sleep and anxiety just seem like they go together very well.
Sure do.
And it's like if you can affect one or the other, like it can help with both.
Absolutely.
So, especially with veterans, I noticed that typically a lot of the work was around trauma and PTSD, which makes a lot of sense. But they had been doing a lot of research on sleep. And what if we just look at sleep and just target the sleep? Does that help the anxiety go down, even without even touching the trauma or the anxiety? Even though in sleep work you still would address anxiety, but maybe not specifically the trauma. And I think it was really nice to see what an impact that had on the community. And the VA I worked with was predominantly Latino. So I think mostly because it was right next to the Mexico border. So mostly Mexican American, Puerto Rican, and then some other from different Latin American countries.
Yeah.
And so I think that was something that was different that came up, right? Because the approach is going to be different.
As it should be.
Yes, absolutely. And that was when I did my training. So I did 2 trainings on cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. So I did an initial training just on an individual treatment level, but then also on a group level. And so in both I had in the group, I don't think I had any females. It was all Latino males in the group. And then individually, I worked with a number of different veterans. But in my training, there wasn't a whole lot of research on like what is the impact of CBTI with the Latinx population. So I really just kind of had to make some adjustments on my own to fit what I was kind of doing with them.
Oh yeah. I feel like there's so much of that, right? As clinicians, when we're doing the work well, ethically and appropriately, we do have to make adaptations, especially if others before us. Not enough coffee in my system yet today. Haven't made it specific to the populations that we're working with. And so I love that you were able to pay attention to that and say, okay, I hear what the research is and I hear what CBTI has been doing. And here's a way we need to make some adaptations to fit the people that are sitting across from me and the people that I'm working with.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think with CBTI and making changes with sleep, this is often things that we've been doing maybe our whole lives. We have these routines around sleep, and maybe that's even something that was passed down with your family on
Right.
like what that sleep routine, your sleep hygiene looks like. So if someone
Mm-hmm.
comes in like myself and they're like, who is this person who's going to tell me that this is going to make my sleep better?
Right.
So, and you know, rightfully so, there's a lot of skepticism. Like, is this really gonna work? Is this gonna be helpful? I've tried so many
Mm-hmm.
different things and nothing has really touched my insomnia or my sleep problems. And so
Can
I
you
think
give
part of
us
that
an
was just like,
example? Oh, sorry,
sure,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Well, I was just going to ask for an example of, breaking it down for people who are listening. What can insomnia look like? And our three pillars are mind, body, and emotion. So if you can kind of explain to us, maybe what does it sound like? What are some of the thoughts that are going through people's head when they're struggling with insomnia? What's happening with their body? Um, and then emotionally, what might be coming up?
Sure. Yeah. So with insomnia, typically in your lifespan, the chances of you having insomnia or problems with sleep are pretty high. Even just kind of in like looking at the population as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Usually what happens is there's some kind of stressful event that disrupts your sleep, and so that could be something like, you know, getting in a divorce,
Mm,
having a big move or a large change, you losing a job. So it really could be something that could happen to anyone. And for some
right.
individuals, that an event like that happens, their sleep is disrupted for maybe like a week or two, and then they're able to get back on track.
Mm,
But there's a lot of other individuals where you start to make changes to compensate for the lack of sleep, and it's those changes you make that keep the insomnia problems going. And they make sense. It makes sense that you're like, okay, this when you don't sleep, it feels. And now you mentioned kind of the body, like it really takes a toll on your body,
oh
um,
yeah.
and your mental health. Just like that connection between your mood and your sleep um, is so important. So I think it makes a lot of sense that this doesn't feel good. I feel terrible. How can I make these adjustments to get my sleep better? So I might start
Hmm.
taking naps during the day to catch up with sleep. I might drink more coffee
Right.
to do that. And so these are probably all things that I've done myself. Right? You're
I'm
feeling
guilty too.
exhausted. I'm gonna take that midday nap. And sometimes that, is like an hour or two long. Um, and those kinds of things end up affecting your sleep and making it worse. And then it just becomes like a vicious cycle of
Right.
doing these changes. Maybe I'm sleeping in some days. I'm um doing other things to help try and keep me awake, but then those are gonna make it harder to wind down before
Hmm.
bedtime. Um,
And and when we start doing those so consistently, like you had said, that's how it drags it out and then it becomes normal, right? I say to clients, I'm like, listen, if I didn't have a good night's sleep, you don't want to be sitting with me the next day because I can't think straight, right? Like it's harder to track my thoughts or even earlier in this episode where I couldn't even get a word out. And, I'm thinking about how this past week has been really challenging because I have a toddler. He's 3 years old, or he'll be three next week.
Hmm.
And he's been navigating a really, really bad, what started out as a virus and then now is an infection.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been so tired because he's up consistently in the middle of the night. And I noticed how it was impacting my body. My body was super achy. Um, I haven't had enough energy or motivation to do a workout and like move my body because lack of sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And those power naps or the naps in the middle of the day you were talking about, yes. I love me a good 20-30 minute power nap in the middle
Sure.
of the day. So, and then emotionally, I could tell too. I was just feeling really, really frustrated, I think is the best word. And having less patience with a lot of things that I normally have a good amount of patience for. And, I think that I fall into that category where you're talking about like people can reset within a couple of weeks because I generally can. But I also know that that's not the case for a lot of people. And it's become so normalized, I think, too, in society to go take a nap or have 3 to 5 cups of coffee a day, and also not even paying attention to how late they're drinking coffee and its impact on the
Sure.
body.
Which I
Whew.
think, especially for the Latinx community, coffee is like a life source. So
Lit.
and you could drink coffee at any time of the day if you have company. There's not a cutoff limit for that. But then that does, because caffeine has such a long kind of life in your body, it really
Mhm.
can stay with you. And that makes it hard to unwind naturally when it's time for you to get ready for bed.
Right.
So that's one thing I think that, yeah, like that you would want to consider. Some of these habits, they're just like what you do. You don't even think about, well,
Right.
what will
It's
that do to my sleep
cultural.
if I have this coffee at 7 p.m.?
Right. I can't even tell you how many times I go home, and I'm going home tomorrow to visit my parents up north, and they have cafe throughout the day. At the
Mm-hmm.
end of, especially after dinner, Papi's looking for his cafecito and he has that straight espresso. And
Sure.
then I'm looking at him at 1 o'clock in the morning. I was like, no wonder you're not asleep, right?
Sure. Sure. Yeah,
So,
and
how
it's
do,
just part of what you do.
right, right. And he's found ways to navigate around it. Actually, now that we're talking about it and I'm thinking about it, he will drink his coffee throughout the day, go to bed late, wake up early, then go back to sleep, and then he'll have a nap later in the day. But then I say that and I'm thinking about culturally again, taking a siesta in the Dominican Republic, that's what my father is also used to.
That's a really good point. So that's another piece when we think about the CBTI, and obviously they don't make any mention of like the cultural norm around napping.
Mhm.
That I don't think I ever saw that in the manual. But you're right. So we need to consider just, yeah, what happens. Yeah, so in some of these countries, also like in Europe, around taking this long break during the day.
Mhm.
Um what that can do. And naturally, and I'm wondering too, even that might have just started because naturally with our like circadian rhythm and sleep clock around after lunch, our body naturally, like, we start to have that dip. We
Yes.
feel it. We all feel that natural dip. So it makes sense. Like that's the time where I most want to crawl into my bed and
Mhm.
to take a nap. I'm like, and even like your temperature changes, like your body temperature changes, and there's so many things that are going on. um and so I think you can, I know you mentioned like the power nap, like, doing a 20-30 minute, and typically kind of what they find that can be okay, especially if you are going to be maybe doing some driving, or you're doing something that it would require you to have a little bit more energy. If you
Mhm.
struggle with insomnia and sleep, that might cause more issues, because sometimes you end up extending that 20-minute to like an hour or 2 hours. And I compare that to kind of like snacking. So if you snack throughout the day, you're not going to be as hungry come lunch or dinner time. It takes away from your body's natural hunger for sleep. So we really want to, and I think you could still have that relaxation time. Like if you're saying like, I want to have that 2 o'clock break, I think that makes a lot of sense. And you could still find time to do, some kind of relaxing activity where you're, curled up on like a lounger, doing it. You could be, doing a meditation, reading a book. I mean, something that's still relaxing. But I think if you have sleep or insomnia problems, the more that you can avoid those longer naps, it can really help you to have that better, more restful night of sleep.
Right. So what I actually, as we're talking about it some more and you're dropping in some of these pieces of information, I'm like, I recognize this information. I forgot I had actually taken a training about insomnia and talking about it and providing some information and techniques and so on and so forth a few years ago. But hearing you talk about like our body temperature dropping and, it's our body's in a circadian rhythm around a certain time of day, generally after lunch, we start to dip a little bit. Um, and I notice one of the things that I actually really like to do and I talk to my clients about, so I'd love to hear your feedback, is around that end of the day, I stop seeing clients around 2, 3 o'clock generally. I step outside and I, ground myself. If I can, I take my shoes off.
Great.
I look around, I let my eyes stretch into the sky and just kind of like look, gaze, and soak in the sun. Right. So those are just kind of things that I feel like have been able to quote unquote wake me back up and give me this like second wind for the day. Um, what are some other small tips and tricks that you've shared with clients to help them navigate this, what could feel like a slump in the middle of the day?
Sure. Yeah, because sometimes it can feel really hard. It's hard to get past that feeling. It can be very overpowering sometimes. But I think that's a great idea. Anytime you go outside and get connected, and that's actually something I think when I was growing up, there wasn't a big focus on like outdoors and nature and going on walks. Which is something I've tried to learn more about as I have gotten older. But I think that wasn't like the focus was more on like just, survive, getting things done, working, doing, that kind of thing. And so it didn't leave a lot of space for that
Pause.
connection. But I think that's a great point that even something as simple as like stepping outside your house or your office to get some sunlight. You don't actually have to do like a full meditation, but even just like going out and like taking some deep breaths, smelling in the air, feeling that warmth on your skin, all those like sensory ways. But typically we talk about things that are like more alerting versus not alerting. And so that also comes up right before bed. So during the time that you do want to be alert, things that are going to keep you awake, that you would want to avoid doing them right before bed. So like if there is like a show that you're really into, a book that's like you're like, what, you can't put that book down.
Yes.
We want to avoid doing that before bedtime. Because obviously that's just going to make it hard for you to unwind. But you might want to use some of those strategies during the slump part of the day, if you can. Obviously, some people you're working and you can't take time to go watch your favorite show. But we want to look at things that are more alerting. And then before bedtime, some of those relaxation strategies can be really helpful. I usually recommend because since I did a lot of my training was from the VA, they have actually an excellent app that I recommend because it's free, which I like. And it has in the app, so it's called CBTI Coach. And it has a bunch of strategies about sleep. And it also has like relaxation built into the app. So there's like a little yoga person that you click on, and in there it has guided meditations. It has deep breathing or diaphragmatic breathing, and I think progressive muscle relaxation. And they keep adding to it. I think they maybe have added even more.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So, and it's nice because it's like in your phone, you take it everywhere, which can also be an issue with sleep. But in this way, it can be helpful to practice this even. So usually what I recommend is to practice outside of just like right before bedtime. You want to build that muscle. So you would practice it
right
throughout the day at any point. But let's say you don't have the time, but you want to have that wind down time. Usually we recommend at least 30 minutes up to an hour, depending how maybe stressful your day has been, but at least 30 minutes of winding down, doing non-alerting, relaxing things. So yeah, reading, if it is a little bit not of a type of book that you can't put down, avoiding those bright lights. So avoiding your phone, which I know is so hard these days. I think most people usually are on their phone maybe right before they go to bed. They turn off your phone and then you get into bed and you go to sleep. And that typically, especially if you have anxiety, that doesn't help. And that might kind of keep things going. So finding those activities for you, and some people they've given me great ideas of things you can do that aren't like using your phone, they're not alerting. I think some of the cooler ones I've heard are like those coloring books, those adult coloring books.
Oh, those are so fun. I love them.
I've never tried them, but they look really, I've had several patients say, no, like it's a great thing to do before bed because it's just like kind of can be like a mindless task.
Exactly.
And so that's kind of what we'd be looking for. Things like, like knitting or things that you can use your hands that help to wind down, that aren't going to keep you awake.
And not thinking too hard, right?
Yeah, you don't want anything that is going to maybe make you like a cue about something really negative that happened that day, or something stressful at work. You just kind of want to let your brain naturally wind down. And it helps you to focus on your body's natural cues for sleep. And that's really hard because if you are focused on a screen, you're
You miss
watching a
it.
show, you start to lose that those like observations of, oh, I'm starting to get drowsy, I'm yawning, my eyes are getting heavy. Usually we kind of fight that. Maybe we're like ignoring those signals. But I think when you have that recharge period, you're more likely to pay attention to those signals. And then you're saying, okay, I'm ready to get into bed.
Yes. And so what you're talking about, there's a couple of pieces. There's the piece around recognizing that if that day in particular has been really stressful, that it can impact your ability to wind down, and you need to maybe, what I like to say is, be gentle with yourself and give yourself permission to have more of a wind down time that evening. And then there's what I've why the body is so connected into Gather and Heal is primarily because we have so many people have such a disconnect from their body. And here's an example of it, of missing our cues and having maybe ignored our cues for sleep for so long that we yawn and like half didn't even notice it. We're so into the show or like whatever it is that we're doing. So I really appreciate you bringing that in, that there's so many layers to this, that we have to pay attention to what's happening throughout our day, that work and family and friends and society, and there's lots of things happening. And how do we give our minds that ease to say, I need to pause now. I need rest. So that way I can further connect and more deeply connect with my body and restore it by giving it what it needs, which is sleep. Right? I tell my clients, I'm like, you're not going to get in your car when it's on E, right? You're going to make sure that there's gas in it. Well, sleep is our gas.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, and I know you had mentioned that you have a 2-year-old, and I think that's something that comes up a lot when you have, or you have a 3-year-old. I have a 2-year-old. That's why I mix it up. But I think especially during that part of motherhood, where there's like less focus on yourself and like what you need. And so that part, like finding the 30 minutes to recharge before bedtime, you might say, no, I don't have time for that. I'm going to be cleaning the kitchen, folding the laundry. Or you're saying like, this is the only time I get to have by myself. So I want to use that doing something else. So sometimes that could be like binge watching shows or, scrolling the internet. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but that also might be a way of like extending that your natural sleep time where your body is maybe tired and if like you're feeling some of that drowsiness come on, but you're saying, no, I just need time to myself. Which is totally understandable. Definitely
Right.
have been there. And just try, but then also recognizing, well, what happens to my body the next day? When I did extend that, extra hour. So I lost an hour of sleep. I was up binging something. And how am I feeling? I know you had mentioned like the irritability. So for me, that's a big one. That if I don't sleep, irritability irritability is like one of the first things to come out. I think anxiety can increase quite a bit. Depression is often linked with poor sleep. And we already know, especially with moms in general, like you might be at risk of that just for other factors that are going on. So I think it can be really important to consider that. Even though I know there's so many other things pulling at you when you do have young children, and even older children too. The demands just kind of change.
It just changes.
Yeah, it doesn't. Yeah, there's still things that you might be worried about before bedtime, even though you're not doing the getting up constantly in the middle of the night like with a younger child.
Right. I found, so my son has always had like a really hard time with sleep, and so we had to get a sleep consultant to support us through that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been truly amazing, the impact of stepping back and learning about sleep for children, for infants and now toddler, and its correlation to adults and sleep, and how much, and I say it to my clients all the time, I'm like, listen, we had things figured out, right? When we're taking care of children, there are lots of boundaries, there's lots of routines and patterns and things like that. And then I don't know what happens along the way, but we throw all those things out the window, and then we can't we have a hard time sleeping or keeping bedtime routines, and morning routines I think are also important. So it's been twofold, of course, being able
Yeah.
to relate, I'm tired, and using it to fuel my information and taking that step all the way back and saying, okay, what are some of the things I do for my son and how do I implement that for myself?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I use that example too, just because I think, it makes a lot of sense for people, even people that don't have children. But I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
would you just put a baby in the crib and walk away and
Mm.
say, go to bed and not do all the, I don't know, 12 steps that you usually do with them before
Right.
bed? And they're always like, no, I would never just put the baby in the bed and just like let them walk away. And so that when I talk about that wind down period, that's the same. Yeah, exactly kind of what you were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
That with them and my son who's 2, he has added so many more steps to his
Oh
routine.
yeah. Oh yeah.
That he likes routine and he likes to have things a certain way. But for him that's kind of what helps him to feel safe, to relax before
Mm-hmm.
bedtime, with his
He knows
books.
what's coming.
Yes, he does. And he knows that. And that's what's really interesting, how they really like routine, and he knows exactly what the next step is. And if you don't do
Oh,
it, he will let you know
oh, you
that you
missed
missed
it. Nope.
something in his routine and will not be happy about it. But that's a good a really good reminder of sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in terms of with children, one of the things that came up for me, I was lucky enough to never really have sleep problems up until I was pregnant with him. Even with my first, I didn't. But I was pregnant with him, and that's actually when I started getting into sleep and insomnia. And so I was able to really connect with my patients because I was struggling. I had with that pregnancy, I was constantly up and I'd have a hard time going back to sleep. Every time I'd wake up, go to the bed, I had a really difficult time. And I think it just made a lot of sense. And I think I started putting more pressure on myself, like, why can't I go to sleep? I have to work tomorrow. I have all these things. And I think that's what happens a lot too, is like the mind is racing. I'm putting so much pressure on sleep, and then it just doesn't come.
Nope. And so the way I like to talk to my clients about that is I'm trained in internal family systems, and how do we talk to those parts, right? Like that part that's keeping us awake in the middle of the night and has us thinking about all the things, our to-do list for the next day. How do we be gentle with that part and let it know, like, hey, I know that you're thinking about all the things we have to do. I'm going to jot them down. And I encourage people to have a piece of paper and pen. Don't put it in your phone. That's not what we're talking about. Put it on pen and
Yes.
paper and let that part know I've written them down and we'll make a plan for them tomorrow, and then try to go back to sleep, right? Because when we're putting pressure on ourselves, I think about it when I'm walking my dog, Nala. If I'm trying to tell her we need to go left, but she's pulling right, if I pull harder left, she's going to pull harder right. Instead of coming down, petting her, hey girl, let's go this way. And then she comes with me nicely, right? That's how we should be treating our parts internally and talking to ourselves. Um, and then, of course, there's other strategies when you wake up in the middle of the night.
Yeah, but it's like that. Yeah, sometimes like that harsh critic that says like, "What's wrong with me? Like, why can't I go back to sleep? Everyone else is sleeping. Something must be wrong, or this anxiety is like too much." And so it's those extra thoughts that kind of keep the anxiety going. And
Mhm.
anxiety is kind of I think about it like it's the opposite of sleep. So what you
Mhm.
need to be able to fall asleep is like it's like totally working against your body's natural drowsiness. So that just kind of it makes it really hard to be able to fall back
Mhm.
asleep. And your idea I think is great. So like being able to write something down if you feel like, you know what, it's staying stuck. So yeah, just kind of writing it down, saying tomorrow is I can kind of think about it, look about it. I think
Mhm.
one of the things that comes up too is that people often will stay in bed when they're having these like racing thoughts.
Mm.
And they're going back and forth. And then you start to associate your bed with worries and stress and like problem solving and doing all kinds of things. So now every time I lay down in my bed, I'm going to be thinking, oh, this is my time to worry and to like work things out in my life. And we don't
Mhm.
ever want to associate our bed with that. So that's a great time
Right.
to get out of bed after like 15 minutes of you're saying like that worry is going, get out of bed. You could write those things down, and then
Mhm.
do some of those like non-alerting activities until you start to notice your body's relaxing. Or actively do something that you know is going to help relax your body so that you can start paying attention to those drowsy cues
Mhm.
that are waiting to come back once the anxiety kind of it goes back down.
Right. And gives it some space.
Hmm.
Um, so I, of course, have asked a few questions and so on, but before we start to wind down, is there anything that I didn't ask that you think would be helpful for people to know about anything? Insomnia, CBTI, maybe other apps that you recommend, anything like that?
That's a good question. I guess that the only thing I can think of it is just kind of knowing that there is support out there. I
Mm.
know just in general, with at least within my own community, therapy, I think, has become more, people are more accepting now of therapy. And I feel like sleep is a great way to like test your foot in the water. There, it doesn't for whatever reason. And I think that's another reason why I like sleep is I've had a lot of individuals, and especially male individuals, but in general, who have never considered therapy, have never even thought about that. But they say, you know what, I can't sleep and I want to sleep better. So I'm willing to try something new.
That's the in.
Yes. And so I feel like sleep has been an in for several of the individuals that I've worked with, where they're like, yeah, let's focus on that. Let's get me sleeping better. And then oftentimes other things come up in therapy that maybe they have been just kind of suppressing or just trying to live with, coping as best they can, as many people do. And I find like that's what's been really rewarding, is that I'm hopefully building that trust around helping with sleep, but then that kind of carries over into other areas. So I guess that would be my main thing. Like if therapy still seems like a foreign process, or it seems like I'm not too sure about that, that would be a great place to start, is to find a therapist that does focus on sleep. See what that's like to have that improve, and then that might make it feel more safe to work on some other areas that are coming up in your life.
Right. Once you've started and built that relationship with that therapist. That's so true. That's a good in.
Yeah, sure. And that's how, because I think that's one of the things I noticed the most, is that for people that are really hesitant about therapy, and maybe rightfully so, I think, because a lot of it has not been directed around how do I approach people of color in therapy? Like, how do I make this just a safe space for them? So I think sometimes, finding any way that I can help to talk about that, or to help them feel more safe and comfortable starting the process, I think has been helpful. And so I that's the one thing that I've noticed with it.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And definitely, I'm sure what's helped in building those relationships too is what we talked about in the beginning, the fact that you do make adaptations and you are culturally aware of some of the things that come up for your clients in the Latino community, and make those adaptations that aren't in the manual or aren't in the particular workshops, but we know how they show up for our clients. That's so important.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, well, thank you so much for joining me today and having this conversation. I'm like, oh, I should do another episode talking some more about sleep, because it's such a big one. It's such a big topic.
I know. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Can obviously can talk about sleep and anxiety for a long time, but I appreciate you having me, Vanessa. And I'm great to be a part of Gather and Heal.
Yes, thank you so much. So for all of y'all listening today, thank you for coming through. Thank yourself for coming through and listening. We hope that you got some tips, or if you need more, don't hesitate to reach out. Our contact info is in the show notes. And for Dr. Faith Perez McGowan, got to insert the doctor. That's important.
Yeah.
The doctora. Put that in there. She worked hard for that. All of her contact information will be in our show notes as well. If you'd like to reach out or connect in any way, it will be there for you. So as always, don't be greedy. Share this with the homies. Let people know we're out here. We've got our Healing Connections membership open, $5 a month, for honestly so much richness, so many rich and juicy conversations that you'll be having with yourself and in our community. So I look forward to seeing you, and can't wait till for our next episode to drop. Thank you so much. I hope you have nothing short of a beautiful fucking day. Peace, y'all.